My name is Chloe Robinson. I'm 28 years old. And at the family reunion, they said I was a stranger. My parents disowned me publicly. I thought walking into that reunion would be my moment of reconciliation, the day I'd finally be welcomed back into the arms of the family I grew up with. Instead, it became the most humiliating night of my life. I stood there, 6 months pregnant, watching my own mother look at me like I was nobody, like I didn't share her blood, like I was just another uninvited guest who crashed their perfect party. The words she said that night still echo in my mind, but what hurts more is that not a single person in that room stood up for me. If you've ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to love you the most, hit that subscribe button and drop a like on this video. Have you ever been publicly rejected by someone you trusted? Drop a comment below because I want to hear your story too. You're not alone in this, and trust me, what happened next changed everything for me. Let me take you back to who I was before that night. I was fresh out of college with a degree in graphic design, excited about my future, and carrying my first child. My boyfriend, Marcus, was supportive, loving, and everything my parents weren't. But here's the thing, my parents never approved of Marcus because he didn't come from the right kind of family. According to them, they made it clear that if I chose him, I was choosing to walk away from them. So I did, and for 2 years, we barely spoke. But when I found out I was pregnant, something inside me shifted. I wanted my child to know their grandparents. I wanted to believe that a baby could mend what was broken between us. So when my cousin Stephanie called to invite me to the annual family reunion, I saw it as a sign, a chance to rebuild the bridges I thought were burned forever. I convinced myself that time had softened their hearts, that maybe they missed me as much as I missed them. I had no idea I was walking straight into a nightmare. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there, the hesitation in Stephanie's voice, the way she paused before saying everyone would love to see you, the fact that my parents never called me directly, but hope can make you blind, and I was so desperate for their acceptance that I ignored every single red flag. You won't believe what happened when I actually showed up. I spent an entire week preparing for that reunion. I bought a new maternity dress, something elegant but not too flashy, because I didn't want to give them any reason to criticize me. Marcus helped me pick out a gift basket filled with homemade cookies and wine for the adults. The kind of thoughtful gesture that screams, I'm trying. I practiced conversations in my head, imagining my mom teeing up when she saw my baby bump, imagining my dad pulling Marcus aside to apologize for being so harsh. I painted this perfect picture in my mind of how the night would go. The reunion was held at my Uncle George's house, this massive property with a sprawling backyard where we'd had every major family gathering since I was a kid. When Marcus and I pulled up, I could hear the laughter and music floating through the air. My heart was racing, but it was that good kind of nervousness, like standing at the edge of something beautiful. I grabbed Marcus's hand, took a deep breath, and walked through that gate with my head held high. For about 30 seconds, everything felt normal. Then, I saw the faces. My Aunt Linda was the first to notice me, and her smile literally froze mid-laugh. She nudged my Uncle George, who turned to look at me with this expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not surprise, just this cold, calculated distance. One by one, conversations started dying down as people noticed I was there. My cousin Stephanie, who had invited me, suddenly became very interested in her phone and wouldn't make eye contact. And then I saw them, my parents, standing near the food table, and my mother's face went completely white. I walked over with the biggest smile I could manage, holding out that gift basket like a peace offering. Hi Mom, hi Dad, I said, my voice shaking just a little. It's so good to see you both, I've missed you. My dad Robert just stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. My mom, Patricia, took one look at my pregnant belly and then looked away, like the sight of it physically hurt her. The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity, and I could feel every single pair of eyes in that backyard burning into me. That's when my mother said the words that shattered everything. She didn't yell, she didn't scream, her voice was calm, cold, and clear enough for everyone to hear. I don't know why you're here, but you're not part of this family anymore. Just like that, in front of 40 relatives, I was erased. But what happened next was even worse, and it's something I'll never forget. Before my mother said those crushing words, there were small signs I completely missed because I was too hopeful to see them. If you've ever ignored red flags because you wanted something so badly, make sure you hit that subscribe button and like this video. Your support means everything. Have you ever walked into a situation where you felt something was off but couldn't put your finger on it? Let me know in the comments because that's exactly what happened to me. The moment I walked through that gate, I noticed my cousin Brandon whispering to his wife Emily, and they both stopped talking the second they saw me. My Aunt Karen, who used to bake me birthday cakes every year, suddenly found the buffet table fascinating and turned her entire body away from me. Even the kids, my little cousins who used to run up and hug me, stayed glued to their parents' sides like they'd been warned about me. It was like walking through a minefield where everyone knew where the explosives were except me. I tried to brush it off, telling myself they were just surprised to see me after 2 years of absence. Maybe they needed time to process my presence, I thought. But then I saw my brother, Daniel, standing near the pool with his fiancée Jessica. Daniel and I used to be close. We shared everything growing up. When our eyes met, I expected him to smile, maybe even come over and break the ice. Instead, he looked at me with this mixture of pity and discomfort, then quickly looked away and guided Jessica in the opposite direction. The whispers got louder as I moved through the crowd. I heard snippets of conversations that made my stomach twist. Can't believe she actually showed up. Does she have no shame? Poor Patricia and Robert. It hit me then that this wasn't surprise, this was rehearsed. They all knew something I didn't, and I was the only one not in on the secret. The air felt thick, suffocating, and I suddenly realized that every single person there had already made up their minds about me before I even arrived. Marcus squeezed my hand and whispered, "We can leave right now if you want." Part of me wanted to run, to protect myself from whatever was coming. But I had driven 3 hours to be there, I had spent a week preparing, and I wasn't going to let fear chase me away from my own family. So I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked straight toward my parents. That decision, that single moment of choosing to stay, led to the most painful experience of my life. My mother's words hung in the air like poison. "I don't know why you're here, but you're not part of this family anymore." Everyone heard it, every aunt, uncle, cousin, and family friend within a 50-foot radius heard my own mother disown me publicly. I felt Marcus's arm wrap around my waist, holding me up because my legs suddenly felt like they might give out. I searched my mother's face for any sign that she didn't mean it, that maybe it came out wrong. But her eyes were ice cold and her jaw was set in this firm, unforgiving line. My dad stepped forward, and for a split second, I thought he was going to defend me, to tell my mom she'd gone too far. Instead, he backed her up. "You made your choice 2 years ago, Chloe," he said, his voice steady and loud enough for the crowd. "You chose that boy over your family. You chose to disrespect everything we built, everything we stand for, and now you show up here pregnant and desperate, expecting us to just accept you back. That's not how this works." His words felt like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. The humiliation was suffocating. I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, not in front of all these people who were watching me like I was some kind of spectacle. My hands instinctively went to my belly, protecting my baby from the cruelty that was pouring out of my parents' mouths. "I just wanted you to meet your grandchild," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought maybe we could move past this." My mother actually laughed, this short, bitter sound that made my skin crawl. "That child is not my grandchild," she said, pointing at my stomach like it was something shameful. "You're carrying the consequence of your rebellion, and I want no part of it. You embarrassed this family when you ran off with Marcus, and you're embarrassing us again by being here. Leave, Chloe. You're not welcome." The words hit me like a physical blow, and I actually stumbled backward. Marcus caught me, his own face red with anger, but I could see he was holding back for my sake. What made it worse was the silence from everyone else. 40 people stood there, watching my parents tear me apart, and not one person said a word in my defense. Not my brother Daniel, not my cousin Stephanie who had invited me, not my Uncle George whose house we were standing in. They all just stood there, some looking uncomfortable, others nodding in agreement with my parents. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just losing my parents, I was losing everyone. And the worst part was still coming. I couldn't just walk away without fighting for myself, without at least trying to make them understand. If you've ever had to stand up to the people who hurt you most, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It helps me share these stories with others who need to hear them. Have you ever confronted someone who refused to see your side? Drop your story in the comments because I need you to know you're stronger than you think. You don't get to erase me like I never existed, I said, my voice shaking but growing stronger with each word. I'm your daughter. I've been your daughter for 28 years, and that doesn't just disappear because you don't approve of who I love. Marcus is a good man, he's kind, he's supportive, and he loves me in ways you never did. I came here tonight because I wanted my child to have grandparents, but clearly, I was wrong about who you really are. My mother's face turned red, and I could see the anger building in her eyes, but I wasn't done. My dad stepped closer, his finger pointing at my face like I was a child, being scolded. Don't you dare talk to your mother like that, he hissed. You think you can walk back into our lives after choosing some nobody over us? Marcus doesn't come from anything. His family has nothing. We gave you everything, private schools, college tuition, opportunities most people dream of, and you threw it all away for what? For love. He said the word love like it was something disgusting, something beneath us. Yes, for love, I shot back, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. Because that's what matters. Not money, not status, not keeping up appearances for people who don't actually care about you. I tried to live up to your impossible standards my entire life, and it was never enough. Nothing I did was ever good enough for you. So yes, I chose someone who actually sees me, who values me for who I am, not for what I can do for the family image. The crowd around us had grown silent, everyone watching this confrontation unfold like it was some kind of twisted entertainment. My mother's voice dropped to this cold, venomous whisper that somehow felt louder than if she'd been screaming. Then you've made your bed, Chloe. Now lie in it. You are not our daughter anymore. You're a stranger to us. And that's when I realized no words, no explanation, no amount of pleading was going to change their minds. But what hurt even more was what happened next when I looked around for support. Standing there, publicly disowned and humiliated, I felt like I was disappearing right in front of everyone's eyes. My parents had just declared me a stranger, and suddenly, that's exactly how everyone started treating me. My Aunt Linda, who used to take me shopping for prom dresses, turned her back and started chatting with my Aunt Karen like I wasn't even there. My Uncle George, whose house we were standing in, looked at me like I was trespassing, like I was some uninvited intruder who had crashed their perfect family gathering. I looked at my brother Daniel, desperately hoping he would say something, anything, to defend me. We grew up sharing bunk beds, telling each other secrets, protecting each other from our parents' harsh expectations. But when our eyes met, he just shook his head slowly and mouthed, I can't. His fiancée Jessica pulled him away, and he let her, choosing his comfort over his sister. That betrayal stung almost as much as my parents' rejection, because I realized in that moment that he'd always known how they felt, and he'd let me walk into this ambush anyway. The worst part was how quickly everyone adapted to treating me like I was nobody. My cousin Brandon, who I used to babysit when he was little, walked right past me to grab a drink like I was invisible. My grandmother, my own grandmother, sat in her chair on the patio, watching the whole thing unfold, and she didn't say a single word. She just sipped her lemonade and looked away when I tried to catch her eye. These were people who had known me my entire life, who had celebrated my birthdays, who had been at my high school graduation, and now they were treating me like a ghost. Marcus could feel me starting to break down, and he whispered urgently in my ear, Chloe, we need to leave. These people don't deserve you. But my feet felt rooted to the ground. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't process that 40 people were watching me be dehumanized by my own parents, and not one of them had the courage or the decency to stand up for me. Not one person said, hey, this is too far. Not one person said, she's still family. My mother must have noticed I wasn't leaving yet because she decided to twist the knife even deeper. Someone should walk her out, she announced to the crowd, like I was a problem that needed to be handled. Make sure she doesn't cause any more of a scene. Uncle George actually started moving toward me, and that's when it finally hit me. If I stayed one more second, I was going to completely fall apart in front of all these people who had already made me feel less than human. What I did next changed everything. Before I made my decision to leave, I took one last look around at all the faces staring at me, hoping someone, anyone, would break the silence and show me a shred of compassion. If you've ever felt completely alone in a room full of people, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Your support reminds me that I'm not alone anymore, and neither are you. Have you ever been in a situation where everyone chose silence over standing up for what's right? Tell me in the comments, because that collective silence can be more painful than the words themselves. What struck me most wasn't just the silence, it was the complicity in their eyes. My cousin Stephanie, who had called to invite me, stood there with her arms crossed, nodding along with everything my parents said, like she agreed with every word. The same cousin who used to text me memes and call me her favorite person, was now acting like I deserved this public humiliation. My Uncle Tom, who had always been the funny one at family gatherings, the one who made everyone laugh, just stood there, stone-faced, not even attempting to lighten the moment or redirect the conversation. It was like they had all been briefed before I arrived. Like there had been some family meeting where they decided collectively that I was the enemy. I watched my Aunt Rachel whisper something to her husband, and they both looked at me with this mixture of pity and judgment. My younger cousins, teenagers who used to look up to me, were recording parts of this on their phones, not to defend me or capture the injustice, but like it was entertainment, like my pain was content for their social media. That realization made me feel sick. These weren't just strangers watching me suffer. These were people who had been at every major milestone of my life, and they were treating this like a show. The most painful moment came when my grandmother finally spoke up, and for a brief second, I thought she was going to defend me. She cleared her throat and said, "Patricia, Robert, you're doing the right thing. Some people need to learn that actions have consequences." My own grandmother, the woman who used to sneak me cookies when my parents were being too strict, had just co-signed my exile. Her words felt like the final nail in the coffin of any hope I had left. Marcus was practically shaking with anger beside me, and I could tell he was about 2 seconds away from saying something that would make everything worse. I squeezed his hand hard, a silent message to stay quiet, because I realized something important in that moment. These people didn't deserve his anger or my tears. They had shown me exactly who they were, and I needed to accept that no amount of pleading or explaining was going to change their minds. But I wasn't going to let them see me crumble completely. I took a deep breath and made the decision right there, that I was done begging for their acceptance. My legs felt weak, my heart was shattered, but somewhere deep inside me, I found a small spark of dignity that refused to be completely extinguished. I looked at my mother one last time, searching her face for any crack in her cold exterior, any sign that she might regret what she'd just done. But there was nothing, just ice and judgment and a determination to erase me from her life. "You're right," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "I did make a choice. I chose to love someone who treats me with respect and kindness. I chose to build a life with someone who doesn't make love conditional on meeting impossible standards. And you know what? I'd make that same choice 1,000 times over, because being alone with Marcus is better than being surrounded by people who only love me when I'm obedient." My mother flinched slightly at that, but she didn't respond. I turned to address the entire group, all those faces that had watched me be torn apart without lifting a finger to help. I came here tonight hoping to rebuild something that was broken. I wanted my child to grow up knowing their grandparents, their aunts and uncles, their cousins. But I can see now that this isn't family, it's a club with membership requirements, and I don't meet them anymore. So I'm leaving, but not because you're kicking me out. I'm leaving because I deserve better than this. The words came out stronger than I felt inside, but I needed to say them, needed to take back some power in a situation where I'd been made to feel completely powerless. Marcus wrapped his arm around me protectively, and we started walking toward the gate. Every step felt heavy, like I was walking away from 28 years of my life, from memories and traditions and the only family I'd ever known. Part of me kept waiting for someone to call out, to say, "Wait, this has gone too far," but nobody did. As we reached the gate, I heard my father's voice one last time. "Don't come back, Chloe. This door is closed permanently." I didn't turn around, didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my face crumble at those words. Marcus opened the car door for me, and the second I sat down, the second we were away from all those watching eyes, I completely broke down. But what happened in the weeks that followed showed me something I never expected. The days after that reunion were the darkest of my life. I spent hours crying in Marcus's arms, replaying every moment, every word, wondering if there was something I could have said or done differently to change the outcome. If you've ever questioned your worth after someone rejected you, hit that subscribe button and like this video, because what I'm about to share might just save you from the pain I went through. Have you ever found unexpected support from people you barely knew? Drop a comment and tell me about it, because sometimes strangers become the family we never knew we needed. Marcus was incredible through all of it, but I could see the worry in his eyes every time he looked at me. I wasn't eating properly, I wasn't sleeping, and my doctor warned me that the stress wasn't good for the baby. One evening, about a week after the reunion, Marcus's mom, Diana, showed up at our apartment unannounced. I barely knew her. We'd only met a handful of times because I'd been so consumed with trying to win over my own family that I hadn't invested in getting to know his. She took one look at me and immediately pulled me into the warmest hug I'd had in months. "My son told me what happened," Diana said, her voice gentle but firm. "And I want you to know something, Chloe. You are not alone. You are not unwanted. And you are absolutely not a stranger." Those words broke something open inside me, and I cried harder than I had all week. She didn't try to fix it or tell me everything would be okay with my parents. She just held me and let me feel what I needed to feel. Then she said something that changed my perspective entirely. "Sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family we're meant to keep." Diana insisted that we come to dinner at her house that weekend, and when we arrived, I was shocked to find that she'd invited Marcus's entire side of the family, his sister Lauren, his brother Chris, his aunts, uncles, and cousins. They'd all heard what happened, and every single one of them went out of their way to make me feel welcomed. Lauren hugged me and said, "We're your family now, whether you like it or not." Chris joked around with me like we'd been close for years. Marcus's Aunt Teresa spent an hour showing me old photo albums and making space for me in their family history. For the first time since that horrible reunion, I felt like I could breathe. These people didn't care about my last name, my background, or whether I met some impossible standard of worthiness. They just cared that I made Marcus happy and that I was carrying their future niece or nephew. But the real turning point came when Marcus's grandmother Alina pulled me aside and told me something I'll never forget. Alina was 82 years old, with wise eyes and hands that trembled slightly as she held mine. She told me that she had been disowned by her own family when she was young because she married outside her culture, and her parents never forgave her for it. "I spent years trying to earn back their love," she said, her voice soft but steady. "And you know what I learned? You can't earn something that should be given freely. Real family doesn't have conditions. Real family doesn't make you beg for acceptance." Her words hit me like lightning because I realized that's exactly what I'd been doing my entire life, begging for my parents' acceptance, trying to earn their love by being perfect, by following their rules, by sacrificing my own happiness. And even after all that, one choice they disagreed with was enough for them to throw me away like I was nothing. Alina squeezed my hands and said, "The family you choose is just as real, just as valid, as the family you're born into. Sometimes it's even more real because it's based on love, not obligation." That night, surrounded by Marcus's family, I started to understand what she meant. These people had no biological obligation to care about me, yet they showed up for me in ways my own blood relatives never had. Diana called me every few days just to check in, not because she had to, but because she genuinely cared. Lauren invited me to her book club and introduced me to her friends as her sister-in-law. Even though Marcus and I weren't married yet, Chris offered to help us set up the baby's nursery and spent an entire Saturday building furniture with Marcus. The contrast was staggering. My biological family, who had known me for 28 years, had cast me aside without a second thought. But Marcus's family, who had known me for less than 2 years, embraced me completely and unconditionally. They didn't care that I didn't share their last name or their blood. They cared that I was kind, that I loved Marcus, and that I was going to bring a new life into their world. That's when I realized that family isn't about DNA or shared history. It's about who shows up when things get hard. I started building relationships with other people who became chosen family too. My friend from college, Sarah, who I'd lost touch with during my relationship struggles, came back into my life and became one of my strongest supporters. My coworker at the design agency, Miguel, took me under his wing professionally and became like a protective older brother. My neighbor, Mrs. Chun, an elderly widow, started bringing me homemade soup and mothering me in ways my own mother never did. Slowly, piece by piece, I was building something beautiful from the ashes of what I'd lost. But the real transformation was still ahead. The real healing started when I stopped waiting for my parents to validate me and started validating myself. It wasn't easy. There were days when I'd see a mother and daughter shopping together and feel that sharp pain in my chest, wondering why I wasn't worthy of that kind of relationship. But I made a conscious decision to focus on what I had instead of what I'd lost. I started therapy, which was probably the best decision I ever made. My therapist, Dr. Michelle, helped me understand that my parents' rejection wasn't about my worth. It was about their inability to love unconditionally. I poured myself into preparing for my baby's arrival, and that gave me purpose when everything else felt shaky. Marcus and I painted the nursery together, picking out soft yellow walls because we wanted to be surprised by the baby's gender. Diana taught me how to knit, and I spent hours making tiny blankets and booties, each stitch feeling like an act of love and healing. Sarah threw me a baby shower, and the room was filled with chosen family people who genuinely cared about me and my future. There wasn't a single blood relative there, and you know what? It was perfect. I also started journaling every night, writing letters to my unborn child about the kind of parent I wanted to be. I wrote about unconditional love, about acceptance, about creating a home where my child would never have to earn my affection or walk on eggshells to keep my approval. Those letters became a kind of therapy, helping me process the pain while also giving me a roadmap for the future. I was determined to break the cycle of conditional love that had defined my own childhood. One breakthrough moment came about 3 months after the reunion. I was at the grocery store and I saw my Aunt Linda in the produce section. My first instinct was to hide, to avoid the awkward confrontation. But something in me had shifted. I walked right up to her, looked her in the eye, and said, "I hope you're doing well." She looked uncomfortable, mumbled something about being busy, and practically ran away. And I felt nothing, no pain, no anger, just a calm acceptance that she had made her choice and I had made mine. The baby became my motivation to become the strongest version of myself. Every doctor's appointment, every prenatal class, every moment of preparation reminded me that I was creating something beautiful despite the pain. I was building a new life, a new family, and a new understanding of what love should look like. And the transformation that came with that realization was more powerful than anything I could have imagined. When my daughter Emma was born, everything clicked into place in a way I never expected. The moment they placed her in my arms, I looked into her tiny face and felt a love so overwhelming, so unconditional, that I finally understood how broken my parents' version of love really was. I couldn't imagine any scenario, any choice, any circumstance where I would look at this perfect little human and say, "You're not mine anymore." The idea was inconceivable, impossible, and that's when I realized that real love doesn't have conditions. Marcus was incredible from day one, changing diapers at 3 a.m., singing lullabies off-key, doing everything possible to make sure Emma and I were cared for. Diana was there almost every day in those first few weeks, cooking meals, holding Emma so I could sleep, teaching me all the tricks she'd learned, raising her own kids. Lauren bought Emma her first stuffed animal, a little elephant that still sits in her crib. Chris set up a college fund for Emma before she was even a month old. This was family, not because of blood, but because of choice. I made a conscious decision to surround Emma with people who knew how to love without limits. Our chosen family celebrated her first smile, her first laugh, her first time rolling over. We had a naming ceremony where Diana, Sarah, Mrs. Chun all became honorary grandmothers, and they took that role seriously. Emma would grow up with abundance not of money or status, but of genuine love and acceptance. She would never question whether she was wanted or whether her choices would cost her family. About a year after Emma was born, my brother Daniel reached out. He sent a text saying he was sorry, that he regretted not standing up for me, and that he wanted to meet his niece. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately, but I'd learned something important. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting people back in without boundaries. I told him that I appreciated his apology, but that he needed to prove through consistent action that he'd really changed. He said he understood, and slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding our relationship. Not as it was before, but as something new and more honest. The power I discovered in choosing my family, in setting boundaries, and in defining love on my own terms transformed everything. I wasn't the desperate girl begging for acceptance anymore. I was a mother, a partner, a friend, and a person who understood her own worth. My parents never reached out, never apologized, and honestly, I stopped waiting for them to. Because I'd found something better, a family built on respect, kindness, and unconditional love, and that was worth more than any blood tie could ever be. Looking back now, almost 2 years after that devastating reunion, I can honestly say that being publicly disowned was one of the most painful and simultaneously transformative experiences of my life. If you've made it this far in my story, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Sharing these experiences helps me heal and hopefully helps others who are going through similar pain. Have you ever had a painful experience that ended up leading you to something better? I want to hear your story in the comments because we all need reminders that endings can become beautiful new beginnings. The version of me that walked into that reunion was still seeking validation from people who were never going to give it. She was still operating under the belief that blood ties meant something sacred, something that couldn't be broken. But the version of me that exists today knows better. I know that family is about who shows up, who stays, and who loves you even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. I know that unconditional love isn't just a nice idea, it's the foundation of any real relationship. And anything less than that isn't worth fighting for. My daughter Emma is now 18 months old, and she's surrounded by people who adore her without condition. She calls Diana Grandma D, and she lights up every time Mrs. Chun comes over with her homemade dumplings. She has aunts and uncles who aren't related by blood but who would do anything for her. She's growing up in an environment where love is freely given, where acceptance is the default, and where she'll never have to perform or pretend to be worthy of affection. That's the gift that came from my pain breaking a generational cycle of conditional love and creating something healthier for my child. Sometimes I wonder if my parents ever regret their decision. I wonder if they think about the granddaughter they've never met, the milestones they're missing, the relationship they threw away. But those thoughts don't consume me anymore. I've built a life that's rich with genuine connection, and I've learned that you can't force people to see your value if they're determined to be blind to it. The door they closed so permanently turned out to be the exit I needed to find my real family. If you're watching this and you've been rejected by people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, I want you to hear this. Their rejection doesn't define your worth. It defines their capacity for love, which is limited and conditional, and ultimately not your problem to fix. You deserve people who choose you every single day, who celebrate you instead of tolerating you, who love you for exactly who you are. Those people exist. Sometimes you're born into them, and sometimes you have to go out and find them. But they're out there, and building a chosen family is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself. After hearing my story, I have to ask you, what would you have done in my place? Would you have tried to fight harder for your biological family? Or would you have walked away sooner? Do you believe that blood is thicker than water? Or do you think chosen family can be just as valid, just as real? I genuinely want to know your thoughts, so drop them in the comments below. And if you've experienced something similar, please share your story too, because reading about other people's journeys through rejection and into healing has been such a huge part of my own recovery. One thing I've learned through all of this is that painful experiences can either break us or break us open. They can close us off to love, or they can teach us what real love actually looks like. For me, being disowned forced me to redefine everything I thought I knew about family, worth, and belonging. It hurt like hell, and there are still moments when that pain resurfaces. But I wouldn't trade the life I have now, the family I've built, or the lessons I've learned for anything, not even for a relationship with parents who could only love me conditionally. If you want to hear more stories about overcoming family drama, finding strength after betrayal, and building the life you deserve, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I share these deeply personal experiences because I know there are people out there who need to hear that they're not alone, that survival is possible, and that sometimes the ending of one chapter is actually the beginning of something even better. Thank you for listening to my story, for being part of this journey, and for being the kind of supportive community that makes vulnerability feel safe. I'll see you in the next video, and remember, you are worthy of unconditional love, no matter what anyone else has made you believe.